Hi, good morning. Today is December 7th, 2025, and it's 7:47 a.m. U.S. Central Time. My name is Reinaldo Aguiar Marcano, and I'm recording this video from my home located at the 2302 Britton Ridge Drive, Katy, Texas, 77494. And this house is located less than 300 feet away from the house of Robert Mueller, who is or was the director of the FBI several years ago. And that is very relevant to this demo and to all the demos that I've recorded so far. Which I think this would be, I mean, if I count them numerically, this would be demo number 100, I think. But I'm not sure about that. Anyhow, the name of this demo is demo 91-6. So this is the sixth demo on the 91 series, okay? And, like if I look at what is in that 91 series, it seems to me like it's, I mean, I didn't design this when I started, doing the series 91, but as it turns out, it seems to be something that would be perfectly fit for law enforcement agencies, like either the IRS or the FBI or the DOJ. I don't know. So this is a sixth video on that series, okay? And I think it's going to be a very interesting video. So I have to tell you, by design, I'm going to so the demo is going to be slow, right? I mean, slower than any other demo because I'm going to do a lot of things in the computer by hand from scratch. Like I did not prepare anything, right? And I did this intentionally. My objective with this is to to transfer my own TTPs, right, on these technical areas. Meaning, I want to record, a set of procedures that, if you watch the video, if you want to replicate the procedures, I'm talking to potentially, right, investigators, like the real investigators. Not the ones that they have, to trigger audits and things like that, but the real ones. If you want to replicate what I'm doing in this video, all you have to do is, watch the video and pause it and do the same thing, right? And then go to the next step, pause it, and do the same thing. And if you do that, you will be able to replicate. It's like a recipe, like what I'm trying to produce here. That can be followed and repeated by any investigator or investigator of any agency. But to achieve that, I need to do every single thing by hand without preparation, right? Because I don't want to create a hole in the procedure that then people may not be able to reproduce. So I'm going to do everything from scratch by hand, right? So that's going to be, I'm going to make the execution of the demo a bit slower, but I think it's a price worth paying for the repeatability and scalability of this, right? Because if you give this to 100 investigators and all of them can replicate this procedure, then we're talking, right? So that's the game plan. Now I have to tell you, yes, I have a bit of a list of talking points, right? I'm trying to think what is the best way to go about this. Yeah, so the first one, right? So this one, so I in the previous, I don't know, 3 or 4 demos in some places I've in fact, let's just start with this, right? Let me share my screen with you because I mean this is a pretty good trick that I want to show you or share with you. Okay. Okay. So if you go to this website, right, the spyhealthfiles.com/IRS, that will take you straight to the book that I am submitting to the IRS, right, with all the transcripts of all the demos in a specific order that makes sense. Now, what I want to show you is this little trick, because this is ingested I mean, this file is hosted by Google Drive, and Google Drive is integrated with this ChatGPT kind of thing. They call it Gemini, right? Like this AI. So it makes it so that you can ask questions. I mean, this is a very interesting application of Gemini, right? Because you can ask questions to Gemini here directly about anything in the book. So what I want to give you this example, right? I want to find something that I said in a demo, but I don't recall what demo is that, right? So I can ask a question. So what I said in that demo, the demo that I'm looking for is a demo in which I said that they may trigger an action with an IRS agent, with an agent that they have embedded into the IRS. So they use back channels. So they intercepted my tax return, analyzed it with accountants, found something that I did not do correctly, and then trigger an action from the IRS to harm me and deprive me from property using a back channel that is not really, um, a real IRS process, right? They triggered this intentionally. But I don't know what is that demo number. So I'm going to ask a question to Gemini here. Which one is the demo that talks about an agent of the network triggering an IRS action to freeze Reinaldo's bank account? It takes a few seconds, right? Because it has 1,400 pages. Right. So this was said on demo. This sequence of with the IRS was explained in demo D91-1. And it says the whistleblower, me, states that a Venezuelan informant told him that the network was planning to trigger an action using the IRS with the goal of ultimately triggering an audit for his tax return and potentially freezing his bank account. So in that demo, I explained that, that sequence that they're doing with the IRS. But, and in one of the demos, I asked the question to the Venezuelan informant if he could try to find out, what is that I did wrong? Because even myself, right? I mean, I checked this tax return like 20 times, and I thought it was perfect, right? And I used tax software to do it, right? So it's something that escaped the tax software and escaped my 20 reviews of the result, right, of the tax software. So it has to be something. But anyhow, yesterday I went out and using the relays that we use, the informant replied to that question, right? And he told me, that he wasn't completely sure because he can't ask too many questions because they are trying to find out who he is. But he told me that he thinks is, and I have to tell you, I hear this and I think it makes sense. Like it could be this. Like I believe it could be this. Could be the thing that they are going to. And I'm going to say it because if this is what they did or what they do, this will show that the informant is legit. Right? Because even I didn't know this. Right? I mean, even I mean that me being the person that prepared the tax return. Right? I didn't know what I did wrong, and he told me. Now I have to tell you, it's kind of funny. The message I got, right? It said amputee income, right? Like an amputee in English is a person that is missing a limb. But uh, let me give you more context about this, right? So I explained in one of the demos that my system, to avoid detection, uses, I'm not going to give the entire architecture, but uses a system that uses I call it multi-hop translations, right? So I translate pieces of text into multiple language with multiple times to obscure the bytes, right? So uh, they cannot use the text that I would normally write in English or Spanish because they know what I would normally write as an anchor for decryption, for cryptanalysis. Let me see if I can find that demo using this, right? Which one is the demo that talks about using multi-step translations of words to avoid interception and crypto analysis? So anyhow, I think the amputee thing is it's a bug, right? Introduced by my multi-translation system. I don't think it's amputee. I think it's imputed income. What he meant. But let me see if I can tell you what demo is. If anybody wants to look at the details on what I said about the system, you'll be able to find it when this replies. So I think it's about, imputed income, right? And it's about the fact that, let me tell you what happened, right? When I bought this house, what I did, I mentioned this before, I liquidated my savings, right, to buy the house, to be able to escape from the other house where they were harassing me, right? So what I did, I registered a company, a corporation, to buy this property. And the property is on the name of that corporation. And I have all the stock in the company, right? I own the company. This company doesn't have any income. The company hasn't sold $1 of anything to anybody. It doesn't have any employees. The only thing that this company has is the property of the house, which I gave the money to the company. I mean, it was my own money, and I gave the money to the company. The company holds the house, but the company hasn't done any commercial activity that justifies income or even expenses, right? Yeah, so this is taking longer. So when I prepared the tax return, and I did this with software, and the software asks you, it's like a questionnaire. It asks you questions, and you answer the questions, and it produces the forms, right? And there's no question in there that covers the situation. This is why it was not created in the form. And I didn't think of this because I'm not an accountant, right? But the audit thing, the action they're going to trigger is about the fact that I live in this house in 2024 for 6 months, right? I lived in this house for 6 months in 2024, so from July to December 31st, and the house is not owned by me, but by a third-party entity, the corporation. And I did not pay rent. I mean, the fact that I lived in the house can be perceived as if the company is paying me. That's an imputed income, right? The company is giving me something of value. It's not giving me money, but it's giving me something of value. I mean, the possibility of me living in the house, right? And that, from an accounting point of view, from going by the accounting standards in the US, that is imputed income. So I should report that as if the company paid me. It's the same as if the company had paid me monetary, paper bills or a deposit, right? They gave me something of value that I need to report and pay taxes on that value. I did not know this, right? Because I was ignorant, and I thought, if this was my money from my savings, it didn't at all cross my mind. But I'm looking at this, and I think, that's probably what they're going to do, right? Now, and after he told me that, it crossed my mind to ask myself if, and I'm sorry for saying this. I don't mean to drag my former partner into this. Like I'm not, that's not my intention. But I'm going to say this because this could show targeting, right? I wonder if they also triggered the audit against my former partner, because she would be in exactly the same situation, right? So if I get the audit and she doesn't get the audit, then it means that it's targeted, right? That they are targeting this admit specifically to harm, right? Because she was in the same situation. She also lived in this house, and I know she didn't put that in her tax return because I have the tax return because she filed it with the court, right? So, and she filed her tax return before I did. So the IRS had like 6 months to trigger that audit against her. And if they didn't, and they only triggered it against me, then it means that this shows that they're targeting me with this, right? So that is the imputed, or imputed is the bad translation of the thing. Yeah, so this question is too specific. I couldn't find it. So it's about imputed income because the house is on the name of a corporation, right? And it's not in my own name. And this is the first time in my life that I'm in this situation. I didn't know. I didn't do that, right? But so of course, I'm going to amend the tax return. I'm going to fix it, right? To take that away from their hands. Now, yes, so that's that. Now, I'm going to transition to a second topic. I'm gonna say this because when I say what I'm gonna say, they are going to know what I did, right? So I might as well say it. There is one demo in which I talked about, and let me find it here to tell you which one it is, right? Which one is the demo that talks about agents posing as romantic interest of the target, passing messages to the real romantic partner as if they were normal conversations with the target. I'm just going to tell you in which demo this is in case you want to look it up, because I'm not going to repeat all of that here. But the agents, in my case, right, the female agents that pose as my romantic interest over the years, I've noticed that when they want to say something to the real, boyfriend or the real husband, right, who's listening, they would say something to me, but it's not intended to me. It's intended because they know that the boyfriend or husband is listening. They say that out loud as if it was directed to me, but they are really passing a message to the real husband or the real boyfriend, right? And this is explained in demo D27 of this series. And this demo is titled Harold Martinez, the Pivot Point, and the Contaminated Food of June 22nd, 2025. Yes, I've the reason I'm mentioning this is because I had a question. I've had this question in my mind for months, right, that I couldn't solve. So I asked the question to the informant yesterday, to the Venezuelan informant yesterday, using this technique, this very same technique that I learned from these agents, right, over the years. What I did was I got into the car with my brother, right, and because I know that they probably bugged the car and they probably have my brother's phone bugged, or at this point it's not a question of how they bugged it, right? I have to assume that it's bugged, right? So I got into the car, right? And I'm telling you this because it shows that I could have had this conversation with him in another way, right? That they couldn't intercept. But I did this intentionally. I talked to him inside the car while we were outside. So the Venezuelan intelligence, right, all these 7 agents that Diosdado has following me all day, would intercept the communication, because I know that the Venezuelan informant has them compromised, right? He's a double agent, right? So my intention with that conversation wasn't really to talk to my brother. It was to send this question to the Venezuelan informant, right? So I'm going to tell you what I said, right, to my brother. I said, well, I have this question that I haven't been able over all these years to understand. Question is, right now in the situation that they are in, I understand why all these Venezuelan intelligence agents are following me, right? I understand that because I have the database and they want to make sure that I don't give it to authorities, right? Or if I give it to authorities, to whom I'm giving it, right? So they can go and stop the flow of information at that point, right? And I understand that, right? But the question that I haven't been able to understand all these years is the following. Before I captured the database, right? What were all these agents here in Katy doing? Right now they're concentrated in harming me and, making sure that I'm not able to speak with the real authorities, right? But before the point that where I captured the database, what were these, 50,000 agents of Eduardo Cabello doing here in Katy, in this specific place? Because there has to be a reason behind this, right? If you think about it, right, what are all these people doing? Why does Eduardo Cabello would put 50,000 people in this specific geographical place? There has to be a reason. Like, this cannot be just to have them there, right? Because Katy is an area before. If you think about Katy, right, Fort Bend County, this area in Texas, it's even today, it's a very suburban area. And I don't know, 15 years ago, it was worse. It was, I think, right, the highways had only like 2 lanes, right? And I know this because I came here for the first time in 2014, right? So almost 12 years ago. Um, and I remember like this was not very well developed, right? Um, so what I'm trying to say is that there's nothing of in 2010, right? There was nothing of interest here in this specific geographical area. I mean, there was no high-profile people to spy on. There's no political players that live here. There's no, I don't know, rare earth minerals to extract, right? There's no big corporations. So why? What is there to win with having 50,000 people here, right? So I asked this question to my brother, as if it was an academic exercise between him and me. But my real intention is that Diosdado Cabello intercepts the communication because I know that the Venezuelan informant has him bugged, right? Um, so he gets the question and then he answers me, right? So in that conversation, I presented a few hypotheses, right, to my brother. I said, well, it could be about money laundering, right? It could be that the presence of these people in concentrated, like all their economic activities, generate a way or create opportunities to launder money of the drug trade, right? Or corruption or some mechanism. And I presented a few hypotheses, and I'm going to show you more or less what that looks like, right? Or what that could look like. But I presented this hypothesis in the car. As I was outside yesterday, one of the gateways that the Venezuelan informant is using to send me information, which at this point it's obvious that the gateways are part of the SEBIN, right? Like the same SEBIN agents, some of them are the gateways, right? That's why they can't find them. But a couple of them sent me bytes, right? And when I got home, I decoded them. And the informant basically told me, bingo, right? That's the thing that he said about that, about my question. So it's about what he's telling me, right? He's telling me, yes, that's why. That's why the hubs exist. It's a way to launder money. So of course, last night, right, after I decoded the message, I kind of did a mathematical exercise to understand what is the opportunity of laundering here, right? And this is a technique in information retrieval systems and data analysis that we call, or at least we used to call it in Google, headroom analysis. And the idea is that you try to put the thing in numbers, right? Even if the numbers are not accurate, they're not going to be accurate, but it gives you an idea of the orders of magnitude of different dimensions of the problem. And that gives you understanding on where the opportunities are, right? So it's a way to kind of understand the distribution of things. So you can understand, okay, if I was them, where I would focus, right, in this. So we call that headroom analysis. So I did kind of a headroom analysis to understand, and the numbers, probably are not accurate, but the orders of magnitude, I mean, if it's a 5 or a 3, right, the first digit, it doesn't really matter. What matters is what are the orders of magnitude, right? Because that would let me see where is that they're focusing on. So what I want to do is share with you that headroom analysis. Yes. So this is, I don't know, I put together kind of a spreadsheet, right? I think it's this one. It's a very simple spreadsheet. Sorry. Let me increase the size of this so you can see it. Maybe 150. Okay. Okay, and this is not formatted, and this is on purpose. I just want to show you the numbers. So let me tell you what this is, right? So the idea here is to do headroom analysis on the hub. In this case, I'm going to take just Katy. I mean, not even Katy, just one zip code in Katy, just one. And because my goal here is to understand where is the opportunity. If I wanted to, and I'm not in the business of laundering money, but if I wanted to launder money using this, how would I, where would be the opportunity to launder the biggest amount of money, right? Because that's where they're going to focus. And of course, after you understand that, you can do headroom analysis. I haven't done it, right? But the next step would be to take the top thing, the top item in whatever wings in this headroom analysis, and then look at the actors within that segment that participate in that activity and do headroom analysis. Because obviously they have to have an aggregator inside of that category, right? And that is going to be 95% of the activity is going to be there, right? Because they need to use aggregators. They can't use fragmentation. So let me tell you what this is, right? So this analysis is for specifically, and these numbers that I have here are based on public information from the census data, right? So they may not be accurate, they may be outdated, maybe it's worse than this, right? But so this is for zip code 77494. And I have to tell you, in the geo index, there are more than 50,000 properties in this zip code marked in the index, right? So that meaning that they're controlled by the Saro Cabello, right? So that's just an additional data point, right? But so what I did, I got all these data points about this zip code to be able to do this headroom analysis. So let me tell you what this is, right? So the first thing I asked Google was, what is the, first of all, this column contains how many households there are according to the census data in that zip code, 77494, which is in Fort Bend County, right? This is the zip code where I live. This is exactly the zip code where all these events that I've been documenting in these videos have happened, 77494. And that's the same zip code where Robert Mueller lives, right? Because he's 300 feet away. So this column over here holds how many households are in this zip code. That's why all the rows in this column have the number 42,000 because there is 42,000 according to the census, right? There's about 42,000 households in this zip code. Let me do this. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Next, right? I started asking questions about things. I'm looking for the averages, right? I'm not interested in which is the highest or the lowest. I'm looking just at the median, right, of the distribution. So, for example, I want to be able to compute the cash flow. So, what is the total amount of money that circulates in this zip code among its organic residents, right? So, of course, what I have to do is look up what is the average household income in the zip code and multiply it by the number of houses, right? That would give me an idea. So, according to the census data, it's about $168,000 per household, which is very high, particularly for a suburban area in Texas, right? This is very, very high. So it means that in average, right, if it's a married couple, each one is making, assuming that the income male versus female is equal, which is not really, but let's assume that, right? So each one is making around $80,000 per year. And the household is making 168 in average. If you multiply that by the number of houses, it gives you this total, right? This total is sorry, right? So it's about 7 billion with B, right? So $7,000 million. So that's the size of the economy of the zip code, right? Because that's the amount of money that enters the zip code. Well, not really, because they have to pay taxes, right? So assuming that they pay 25% taxes, right, to the federal government, then the total amount of effective money that could circulate in this zip code would be the 75% of that number, right? Right. And this other column, I'm going to call it for now, and maybe I'm going to find a better name for it, right? But I'm going to call it network take. Okay. So this tries I mean, this is just an estimation, right? So this tries to estimate what amount of this row could be captured by the network, by this criminal network, right? Recoup or recover or capture, right? And I want to tell you, these are formulas that I came up with, and there might be better ways to do it. But this is, again, this is just a headroom analysis to understand where is the biggest opportunity for laundering, right? So I'm going to fill this one here. I'm just going to format it just a little bit so we can this is not to distract you, but just to make it more easy to see, right? Okay. So let's talk about this, right? So the hypothesis behind this cell is the following, right? Assume that there is an amount of money that circulates on this economy, right? Which we know is about 7 billion with B dollars, right? Now they have to pay taxes, right? So I have to subtract from that 25%. To assume that in the average, some people, the people that make more money would pay more, the people that make less money would pay less, but in average, it would be around 25%. So that leaves 75% of 7 billion available in the economy. Assume for a second, and this is what this cell in this particular row tries to represent, that everybody, they spend all the money through the year, right? That they earn, that they spend it. Some people will save some amount of money, but let's assume that for the conversation, for this analysis, that people will spend 100% of what they receive, of their perceived income after taxes, and assume that they consume it using credit cards, because this network controls all the online payment processors and all the credit card processors, really. 3%, the 3% processing fee that I've talked about, that they're using to take 3% of the money of the world, right, to finance the network. So if you do that math, right, so from the available money in the zip code, and the zip code is completely controlled by this network, right? What would be the 3% of that, right? So if everybody spends their money using credit cards, how much of that money will go to the Communist Party of China? That is the question, right? Via the 3% credit card fee. Well, in this zip code, it would be something like $161 million per year, right? So that is the size of the opportunity in this zip code alone, right? I'm just talking about one zip code in one place in the US, right? So it's $161 million that they could recoup with the 3% credit card processing fee, just from these people, right? So you see, it makes sense to give them that high salary, right, that we talked about before, that it's above everybody, every other zip code in Texas, because they higher their income, they higher the recouped money by the Communist Party of China via the 3% credit card fee. And this is what I was saying before, right? I think if you look within this category, you will find that the distribution of the credit cards in this zip code of the agents in Katy, they are probably using one or two banks, right? It's going to be concentrated in one or two financial institutions because they need to use aggregators, right? For obvious reasons. So let's move to the next row, residential estate value. This is important because at least in this particular zip code, the way taxes work. So in the US, I'm gonna talk about a few things that are specific to the US, right? And they may not be the same in other states or even other countries, right? But in Texas, well, in the US, there's two levels of taxation for personal income. There's federal tax and there's state tax. Some states charge their own taxes. But Texas, interestingly, they do not do that. There's no state tax in Texas for income. The way they perceive money is different, is through the property taxes. So what they do is that the government, the local government for Ben County, for example, assigns or assesses the value of the property of your house. And they say, well, your house is worth $500,000. And each county has a tax rate. For example, here I think it's 2.6%. So it means that every year you have to pay 2.6% of the perceived value of your home to the county. And that's basically the replacement for the personal income tax, because Texas has no personal income tax on the state level. But they perceive this high tax from the property values. Right? So this creates an opportunity, right? Because it's a high amount of money. Now, the way this works, and works at least here in Texas, right? And I tell you this because I mentioned this in a previous demo. They captured me as a client of this O'Connor Associates, right? Company that they have, which is a big part of this particular line item. So the way it works here is that the county makes an assessment, right? They say, well, we think your house is worth $800,000, right? And you're going to pay 2.6%. But as a citizen, you have the opportunity to contest that, right? And to explain to the county why you should not pay that amount, either by contesting the assessment value, or, which people usually tend not to do, because you want the assessment value to be high because that increases the value of the property, right? When you sell the house, you get more money. But there's other ways to pay lower taxes, right? So there's a collection of these firms like O'Connor Associates, which I was a client of. And what they do is that they represent you for the property taxes before the county to make these claims to lower your tax bill from the property taxes. And the way they do it is that they offer to represent you without charge. They don't charge there's no fees, right, up front. But if they get any rebates or if they successfully lower your tax bill in the property taxes, you have to pay a percentage of what you save to them. And it's a high percentage. I don't recall if it's 45% or 50%, but it's something very high, right? So you see, this creates an opportunity, because if they're managed, imagine a scenario where they manage to lower the tax bill of everybody, right, by $5,000 each, right, of 42,000 houses. It's a tremendous amount of money. And half of that money is going to be to O'Connor Associates or a similar firm, that if it's controlled by Diosdado Cabello, at the end it's going to go to Diosdado Cabello, right? So it could be a way to recoup for the network a high percentage, a considerable percentage of the actual property value of all the houses in the hub, right? So this is what this row is trying to estimate. How do I do it? Well, I ask the census data, what is the average house value in this code? It's $500,000. There's 42,000 houses. That leads to, let's see it in dollar amount. That leads to 21 billion. So the real estate value of the houses alone in the zip code in this hub is about 21 billion with B dollars, right? $21,000 million. So the estimation of what the network take could be is basically the 2.6% of that value, because that is the amount of the property tax in Fort Bend County, right? So each year, what is going to be paid to Fort Bend County in property taxes is going to be 2.6% of 21 billion, right? So we're talking about $546 million that are going to go to Fort Bend County in the form of property taxes every single year, right? So $500 million. But say that out of these, they using O'Connor Associates and similar firm, people contest the tax bill and they reduce it by a certain percentage, right? Say that they reduce it by 30% for everybody, and of that 30%, half of it goes to the network, right? So what I have to do is basically compute the 15% of this, right? So it's about $81 million. So the network has the opportunity to recoup every year about $81 million just from this zip code, right? in this with this mechanism alone. So you see, they probably apply multiple mechanisms in parallel. It's not one thing; it's multiple things. That's why we need to do headroom analysis. So I'm not going to be making calls comparing them one to one, but after we have them all, we'll see where the headroom is, right? Then the next thing is residential financing, right? So residential real estate financing. So all these houses, right? People in the U.S., because the American dream, and you want to own your home, and you get a mortgage, and you pay your mortgage. This is really based on financing. So in reality, the Communist Party of China doesn't really need to even buy the houses. They only need to finance them, right? And if they control the financing entity, they get paid interest for financing the houses that they're using to do this. Right? Imagine it's a it's a tremendous business model, right? They are getting paid to do this. But let's do the same, right? I think I made a mistake here putting this number here. Okay, no, it's not a mistake. Why is 450,000 and not 500? Because the average value of the houses is 500,000, right? Which is also very high if you compare it to the rest of the Houston area, right? But that's a different conversation. And it makes sense because at the end, I guess, what they probably promised the agent is after we do this, the house is going to be yours, right? So you're basically going to get the house for free. I mean, I guess that's part of the payment, right? But it's $500,000, right? But they cannot finance 100% of the house. The person has to give a down payment, right? And that payment that down payment could come from crypto from another way, right? But let's not even get into that. But I think the down payment, the minimum, is 10%. So if the house is worth 500,000, and you have to give 10%, which would be $50,000, then the financed amount would be 450. That's why this sell is a bit different, right? So it's basically multiplying the average value of the home by 0.9 to compute this. And again, there's 42,000 houses, right? So there is the financing value. So the finance value of the real estate market could be around 18 billion with big dollars, right? $18,000 million. And the interest rate in the US on this area, right? And I know this because I had a mortgage and I paid that interest. For me, it depends on your credit score, it depends on many things, right? But I don't know, I'm going to just use the number I saw. It was 2.9%, 2.99, almost 3%, right? So if you do that math, right, in interest, so assume that they finance all these houses, I mean, through different banks and different institutions, but at the end, it was the Communist Party of China that financed all these houses, right? With this percentage of financing and this interest rate of about 3%. That would give you an interest income for these institutions that I imagine would be controlled. If you're going to do this, you're going to use your own financial institutions, right, to get paid via the interest. And this is one of the examples. If authorities go into this line and look at who has financed all these houses, I'm guessing that you would find people like TL Global, right? Or Pfizer, or I don't know, like the companies that are heavily under the control, as acting as big aggregators of financing of these houses, right? Because that's how they're getting paid. So anyhow, the interest income just in this zip code is about, or could be about, $567 million per year, right? So it's more than $500 million just in the interest on the financing of the houses. The next item is gas, like the fuel for your cars. And this is described in another demo. Let me tell you, let's ask Gemini, which demo was that? Which one was the demo that hypothesized that Diosdado Cabello could be using the bookies gas station to launder money? There's a demo in which I have the recordings and everything. There's a demo where there's a certain set of hypotheses. Now this is not working very well, but there is a, let me see, gas station. So, well, maybe it wasn't so clearly spelled out in that demo, but the demo that talked about the book is gas station anomaly. Let's call it that way. And again, like all these things that I'm describing would be like in this headroom analysis, right? Would be like the first order effect, because there are other second order effects, like how these would affect the prices of the housing market, right? They also capture money that way, long term, or how this affects the price of gas, right? When if they coordinate all the agents to fill up the tanks at the same time, and this also creates second order effects that could be immense. Right? But this is just the headroom analysis of the first order effect of this setup. Yeah, so it didn't find it, but okay, let's keep going. So on the gas, right? So the math is that if there are 42,000 houses, and because of the metrics that I have in the pipeline with the footage that I have recorded over more than a year, I can tell you that in average there is more than 3 cars per household, because cars are a big part of the network, right? Because of what I described before of the espionage machine and all that. So if you do the math, it would be more than 120,000 vehicles, and assume that they have to put $40 per week on gas on every car, and you do the math, and that leads to something like $262 million per year in gas consuming the hub. Now, this is an interesting item because at the end, this money goes to the oil companies that they control themselves, right? Like I'm talking about Citgo and all those oil companies that sell this gas, and the gas stations. Like all this money at the end goes directly to their hands, back, like immediately. And this makes it so because this gas has to be, I mean, it's produced by refining crude oil, which their countries control and sell, right? So at the end, this also makes it so that they get money directly because they're selling more crude oil, even if the oil is refined in the US, right? In this case, in this area, right? Because it's coming to this hub. So there's an example of a second order effect, right? This is not accounting for the money that they're getting directly via the purchase of crude oil. That could be, Brent 90 or something like that. And, I did the same exercise with food. If you estimate $1,000 per month in food, to be conservative, 42,000 households, it would be $42 million, right? And assume that, because they control all the food stores here, right, for obvious reasons, to be able to keep control, to be able to do other things to people if they misbehave, and misbehave, quote unquote, right? But assume that the profit margin is 10% of those grocery stores, right? Which would be high for a grocery store, but whatever. The opportunity there is only $4 million per year. So if you do this headroom analysis, right, and then you sort your spreadsheet by this column, let me freeze this. I'm going to, what is that? You freeze it? Yeah, I'm going to freeze this. Right. So if you sort it, you will see in the headroom analysis, right, that the opportunities are in the biggest opportunities, right? I'm going to put it in colors. The biggest opportunity would be, I'm gonna say red. It's going to be this one. It's basically the interest on the value of the house, right? The mortgage interest, right? That's what the biggest opportunity of capturing money for the network would be, right? And the second biggest opportunity is gas. I'm gonna make it this color. Oh, sorry. Right. And the third biggest opportunity would be on the 3% credit card fees. And the fourth would be on the property taxes, right? Via O'Connor Associates and similar, right? So that one is not a super big thing, but it's definitely considerable, right? Um, right? And to give you the short story, the opportunity here for the network to recoup money directly into their pockets every year is about $1 billion. And again, this is just only one zip code, right? Only one zip code in only one country. And remember, they are a global network and they operate globally. And you can actually see this visually, right? If you go to spyhell.org, which is the website where I have the search engine that I prepare for people, and you click on Earth, right? Okay, there is a filter here that this is just to give an idea, right? That says zip postal, right? If you click on that, it has a list of zip codes, right? And you can see, and this is in different countries, right? But you can see how many zip codes they have, right? So the zip code that I'm talking about is this one, and this list is sorted by. You see that it has this number here on the right, right? So on the left of this column, that's the zip code. On the right, that's how many points there are in that zip code, right? Points marked in the geo index. All this data, all this dashboard is derived from the geo index that I captured from the network on September 11th, 2024. That's the database that they're using to record the crypto payments and the logistic points for their operations, right? So you see the zip code that I'm describing in that headroom analysis is this one, 77494. It's not even the top zip code. Like the top zip code is this one, 077190. And this is not a US zip code. This is something somewhere else. Let's see what it is. So if I click on only on this, it will filter by that. So this is in Romania, right? So the top zip code of this network in terms of sheer number of points is in Romania. Of course, the economics, it doesn't mean that it's the most profitable, right? Because the economics of the zip code matter, right? In Romania, like the currency doesn't have the same value as the US dollar, right? So it may be the biggest in terms of number of agents or number of houses, but it may not be the biggest in terms of economic value. Now, if we look at, let's try to find which one is the one. And this is, I'm now getting into the debugging, right? So what I'm doing here is transferring to you my TTP on how I debug these things using this toolkit that I built, right? And I'm giving you the toolkit as well. I'm giving you access to the toolkit, right? And if you come talk to me, I'll give you the code of the toolkit and I'll help you develop it further. Let's try to find what is the highest the zip code with the highest number of points, right? In the US, right? Because I'm concentrating in the US. So what I would do to do that, I will first remove this only filter that I set, right? So I'm going to remove it. So I'm gonna make it so it's not filtered. Then I'm gonna filter by country, and I'm gonna filter in the US only. And then I'm going to go back to the zip code filtering, right? So this zip code is the top zip code in the US. Let's see where that is. This is in Jefferson City, MO. In Missouri, right? So this is the top zip code in the US in terms of number of points. And I imagine economic value, right? Because I mean, at least it's two different cities, right? So the economy might be different. Like for example, if you go back to the headroom analysis, maybe the house value in Missouri, in Jefferson City, maybe the medium house value is not 500,000. In fact, let's let's do that. Let's see, let's see, let's compare it, right? Uh, See, it's much lower, right? It's half. But we also have to ask how many households, right? Because it could be that there's twice the number of households. No, it's half, right? So this zip code, although it has more points, it has a lower economic value because of we already know that the financing of the houses is a big thing, and the houses are worth in the median are worth half of what they're worth in 77494 in Katy, right? And also there's half the number of households. So this is very interesting, right? And maybe this is a good way to tell you about this. So one thing that I was thinking about was, okay, so how can I use these insights to identify hubs at a scale, or to do headroom analysis on the hubs themselves? Like how to identify the hubs that have monetary value that the IRS could capture. Well, I think it's a combination of two things. It's the combination of the cash flow, this metric, and the residential property value, right? And here I can see a big statistical analysis anomaly, right? And it's the following. If you think about it, right, what this is saying is that in average, every household makes almost $200,000 per year, and the house value is 500K in average, right? But this is abnormal because it would mean that, imagine, right, if you're making 200K a year and you are very diligently saving all your money. Imagine that you don't spend money in anything. You don't even eat. I mean, I'm just saying this to make a point, right? To show you what I was thinking. If you do this, right? If you pay your 25% taxes to the federal government, and you save, I don't know, let's put it on round numbers to make the computation easier, right? So say that it's 200K average income, and you save 75% of that. You don't eat, you don't do anything. You save all the money. I'm just making a point. I know this is impossible in practice, but let me show you what I was thinking, right? If you do this, it means that you will be able to save 150K per year. And if the house is worth 500K, this means that in only 3.5 years, you would be able to pay for the house in full. You would own the house outright in 3.5 years, right? This is incredibly low. Like people in the US, like people that are not part of the network, they have to work 30 years to be able to pay for a house. 35 years. There's some talk about making mortgages of 50 years. Like, imagine that. So the non-network people, the regular people, the 98% of the population, for them, it takes 30, 40, 50 years to pay for their house. And it's a house of a lower value in general, right, than these houses that the agents have. But for them, it's super easy. They can pay for the house in 3.5 years if they're diligent about saving, right? So this is an anomaly, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say, if you do headroom analysis on the zip codes, what you need to look for is zip codes where the household income is high relative to the house value in the medium, or putting in different words, that the time it would take to pay for the house is less than 5 years, right? If you save all the money, right? If you aggregate all the money in 5 years, you can get to the house to the value of the house, and you can actually use that metric to find agents, right? And I've done this exercise before. So that is an interesting metric, right? But going back to the dashboard, right? What is it here, right? So you see, the zip code that I'm talking about, in terms of number of points, it's not even the top. It's not even the top. But it might be one of the ones with the highest monetary value. And that's maybe the reason why it's controlled by Diosdado Cabello, right? Because he's a fundamental player in this network, right? And he has to get paid, right? He wants to get paid, right? So it's obvious that it seems to make sense that he would control that. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that why, if you look at the demographic distribution in Katy, right, it has 42,000 houses. It has something like, in this zip code, right, it has something like 100,000 people. And out of the 100,000 people, I don't know, 90,000 are Venezuelan. Like the percentage of Venezuelan people to non-Venezuelan people is super high. abnormally high. The reason is because all these people are, directly or indirectly tied to Venezuelan intelligence. Diosdado Cabello, right? So that's why. But you can do the same exercise and find other zip codes that are interesting, right? So, for example, the second most interesting zip code in the U.S. is in this one. This is uh, Portsmouth. I think this is. Let's see where that is in the map. Yeah, New Hampshire. Um, yeah, it has a population of 21,000. So it's a small. I mean, in terms of houses, right, and number of people, but it has a high concentration of points, right? That tells you that's. It depends how you look at it, right? So there's two type of values that I'm kind of touching on in this conversation, right? One is the monetary value that in terms of what the network can recoup periodically every year or extract, right? The monetary value that the Communist Party of China can extract from the zip code. That's one thing. But a different thing is what is the intelligence value or the, the value for the network of these agents, right? That's another metric. So they don't have to correlate, right? Yes, but I think, more on the general, level of things. I think the takeaway is that you can use this dashboard to do this kind of analysis, right? And it has all sorts of tools. Like, I'm not going to go through all of them, but you can filter by latitude, by longitude, but you can search by address. You can filter by state, by city, by country. Whether it's a residential property or not. Like, it has all sorts of things. So I really encourage authorities to, examine it to see if you can use it, right? And again, my offer stands. If you come talk to me, I will, give you the code and help you build better things than this, right? Because I built this in the circumstances I am, right? But if I had, more resources, I would do it better, right? And you can do it better. And I offer to transfer what I know so you can do it better than what I did. So yes. So now I'm going to transition because this dashboard at the end, what it's using is the decoded geoindex, right? So you're seeing this thing visually here, but what this is really doing is doing a query to a database that I also made public. And these data sets are available. You can download them and you can use them right now. It would take you 5 seconds to use them, right? So I'm going to do something here to show you how you can, and this is what you could replicate if you wanted, right? How you can run queries directly on this database yourself without any prior requirements. You don't need to have anything. Like, the data is already public, right? And I'm going to show you how to use it. So I'm going to do this from scratch, right? So you can see and you can replicate this process, right? So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go to spyhealth.org/evidence, right? And then I'm going to do a search in this page. Okay. I don't know if you are able. Yes, you can see what I can search. So I'm going to search for this word, backtick Musk. And I apologize for this because I have a page where I have the data sets published, but they took down the page. I think that's why they probably took down the keyopinionleaders.com website. It wasn't so much about hiding the posts, because the posts, some of them are already here, also here, but it's about hiding the data sets. I understood that this morning while I was thinking about how to present this information. So what I'm going to do, of course, I'm going to copy that page and I'm going to publish it, right? In a way that they can't take it down. But this page exists. In fact, if you go to, let me show you, right? So if you go to the spyhealthfiles.com, right? And click on resources, there is an item here that says open data sets, right? I made all these data sets open months ago, and they're published and explain how to use them, and it has example queries and everything, right? But if you click on that, it doesn't work, right? Because they took down this page using their access they have within Google. because this website is hosted at Google. I control this website, but I haven't had the time to fix it. And I didn't put effort into it because I thought, that company is never going to progress in the world until I don't get rid of them, right? Until they don't stop doing what they're doing, no tech company can progress unless they control it, right? So that's why I haven't put any effort in bringing it back up. But I understand now that what they really want to bring down is the data sets. So of course, I'm going to copy the data sets. I'm going to make it available in a way that they can bring it down. But anyhow, so I'm going to show you manually how you can get the same information, right? Even if the page is down today, right? So what I would do, I would go to spyhealth.org/evidence, right? This URL over here. And I will do a search for backtick Musk. And this will show you a series of examples of queries, right? So these are BigQuery queries. BigQuery is a system, a distributed database maintained and offered by Google as part of their Google Cloud offering. And in that database, I made the whole data set public. And it's available. You can see it and you can query it directly. The only thing you need is a Google account. And you can get one for free. You don't even have to pay to get one, right? So because I already have a Google account in this computer, I'm going to use my Google account and I'm going to do this query, right? So for example, this query I think has a mistake, but it doesn't really matter much. I'll fix it and show you, right? Okay, so I go to console. What I did, I went to console.google.cloud, console.cloud.google.com, right? And this opens Google Cloud, and here I'm going to search for BigQuery altogether. It's one word. And I'm going to click on the first result, which is the BigQuery product. So what I'm doing is finding BigQuery within the Google Cloud offering, okay? And then you get this. This is what it looks like. Let me put it this way. And here you have tabs. And what you can do is open a new tab, and this gives you the opportunity to enter a query. And I'm going to copy that query from Spy Health, right? There's an example query. I don't recall exactly what I was doing with that query, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to paste it here. And I'm going to remove the error is this address. I changed the schema, and that field address is not in this table anymore. But I'm going to remove it, and it's going to work, right? So when it works, you will see this green tick or check mark here. This means that the query compiles, that the query would work if you hit run. And all I have to do is to hit this button, run. So now what I'm doing here is actually writing an SQL query and querying my database that I made public, which is a reverse decoded database of the networks database, right? And you see the results here. But you can take it further, right? What you can do, let me show you this. In this query, one important part is this text that is in green that says Musk, Kalanick, Omidyar. No, sorry, this one over here. This one that says Musk Kalanick Thiel Omidyar Geo. The Omidyar has a typo. It's missing an R. I wrote that months ago. I made the typo and I didn't fix it. But this text in green is really the database that is being queried, right? So this is one of the data sets that I made public. And the most important part here is this, because this is the project ID in Google Cloud in which I host the data set that I made public, right? So what you can do is you can take and copy this text, right? So the project ID, which is Musk Kalanick Thiel Omidyar without the R geo, as in geographic database. And you take that text and you replace the project in the URL of Google Cloud by that. So if you do that, it's going to open BigQuery, but on this project, right, that I made public. And you can see here, so this is the BigQuery data set that I made public. And if you expand it, you can see all the databases, right? So these are all the data sets that I made public. And for example, this one that says PayPal Mafia ranked spy locations in Russia, China, Iran, Venezuela, and Cuba. This is a data set that I was working on April 15 and 16 that caused Morgan Hypner to dispatch the process server to harass me. And this is documented in the federal lawsuit, right? And in fact, I think if we see the details of this when this was created, I think it would tell you. Yeah, so it was created on January 24, but this is no, so this wasn't that specific one. Hmm. Let me see. Could be this one. Yes, see. It's one of these. One of these was created on the 16th. April 19th is not this one, but one of these, I'm sure, was the one that caused the harassment. Oh no, I remember what happened. I created it in a different data set, and then I copied it over a few days after. That's why the date doesn't exactly match, but I think it was this one. Yes. So I created it on the 16th, but it was in a different data set in BigQuery, and then I copied it. That's why the date doesn't match. But this is the one that has the agents of Cesaro Cabello and all those people, right? In Caracas and Tehran and Beijing. And this is when I did that on the 16th, Morgan Heibner dispatched the process server within 20 minutes, right? Well, I mean, reality, William Kyle Adams, right? But anyhow, I digress. So now, right, you can see here all the data sets, and you can see the schema. Like if you click on a schema, you can see the fields that it contains, right? Um, and for example, the interesting ones here would be this one, right? So this one that says Elon Musk military and paramilitary positions worldwide. This is a very interesting table. Uh, it has the latitudes and longitudes and the scores, right, of the properties. But it does not have the decoded addresses. The one that has the decoded addresses, I think, is this one that ends with worldwide. So the one that says PayPal Mafia rank, spy assets and locations worldwide, right? And you can see that this one has the address field, which is the most interesting one because you already have, I mean, I spent thousands of dollars. I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars computing those addresses, right? Because I have to reverse map the geolocations to actual addresses, and this costs money using the Google reverse geocoding APIs. So this is the most interesting one because you already have the addresses, right? So, for example, right? So I'm gonna do this with the query, but I'm gonna show you also a better way to do it, okay? But I'm gonna do that. So I'm doing this very low level, right? So you can do this as a software engineer if you want, but I'm gonna show you how to do it as a non-software engineer as well. So for example, right, I could do something like this. Let me see, right? So I could do something like, give me all the fields. Okay, the other field that is interesting is the score, right? The score is going to be this one, right? Okay, so I want to know the address and the score, right, from this table. And I'm going to say order by the score. Descending, right? So I want to get what are the top, the top locations, the top addresses that I have decoded already. And I'm going to limit it to 10, right? So give me the top 10. Okay. Well, I have to do it in my own project. Right? I cannot run the query here because that query has the data, but it doesn't have permission to run queries in that project. So I'm going to open a new, so cloud.google, no, cloud.console, no, sorry, console.cloud.google.com, right? And I'm going to go to BigQuery. So I'm just going to copy the query that I created to my own project so I can run it because I don't have permission to run queries on the project that holds the data, right? It's like there's a distinction between where the data is and where you run your query. You have to run the query in your own project. So I'm going to create a new query here, and I'm going to paste the query that I produced over there, right? So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it here. Okay. I'm missing an R. Order by. Okay, you see, I get the green check mark, meaning that my query passed validation, right? It compiled, so I can run it. I'm gonna run it. Okay, well, the address, I mean, you need to make another condition where the address is not null, because you want to eliminate the ones that the addresses haven't been resolved. Right? So the top address in the world, I mean, from the ones that I decoded, right? Because I said this costs money, right? So I had to prioritize. I created a pipeline to prioritize where to focus, right? The decoding effort, right? Because my resources are limited, right? I don't have unlimited money to spend on this, right? And I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on this. But I focus where to spend the money, right? In a way that is intelligent. So of that subset, the top address is this one by far. Like you can see, there's an order of magnitude between the number 1 and the number 10, right? And this address, it's I reported the owner of this to the IRS, and it's this, right? 114 Jones Neck Road, Shirley, New York, 11967. And the second one is an equestrian house, right? And we talked about the equestrian houses in demo. What is the demo that talks about equestrian markers in street names? And a good example of an equestrian house is Andrade, right? El Tuerto Andrade. What is his? Is Alejandro, I think. See, they change it for. They change. I mean, they're triggering the top answer as a wrestler, right? Obviously, El Tuerto Andrade is not a wrestler. He's a corrupt official of the Venezuelan government that pled guilty, I think. Yes, Alejandro Andrade, right? So Alejandro Andrade, his house had this equestrian marker it was like a horse ranch, right? It got seized by the authorities. So anyhow, the second most important house in the network in the US has this equestrian marker and is in Mount Pleasant. I think that's North Carolina, if I recall correctly. South Carolina, right? Yes. And then you can also do things like you can augment the queries, right? You can say, well, where the address is not null and where I think contains, right? Contains substring address user. So what I'm saying is that not only it's not null, but also it has the word USA, right? So that would restrict it to only US addresses, right? That have been resolved by my targeting system, right? So this is a better result set. This is funny. The third one has the eBay marker, right? You see East Bay, right? So eBay. This is funny. Right? And the winner of this is this one, right? It seems like an official. Let's see what is in there. It's a It's an apartment complex in South Carolina. That's interesting. Okay, so this part, right, has been what I did. Just to recap what I did. First, I located the project in Google Cloud in which the open data sets that they took down the page so nobody can find them, but I'm showing here how to find them, right? So basically, I went to Spy Help, copied the project ID, which is the first part of this green text. Then I went to BigQuery and replaced the project parameter in the URL by that. And that allowed me to find the entire data set, right? Which is this that I'm showing here on the left. And then by expanding the project and then the data set, I can see the tables. And then by clicking on the tables, I can click on the schema and I can see the schema. And I can write SQL queries. But this still could be too complicated, right? For a non-technical user. So there is an even easier way to do this, right? What I'm going to do now is I'm going to create from scratch a dashboard like the one I was showing you before. And I'm going to do this in front of you in 10 minutes, okay? So to do this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use Google Data Studio. Which was rebranded, I think, to Looker, right? Looker Studio. This one, right? It's called Looker Studio. So you go to that website, right, and you can create dashboards here. This is a tool to create dashboards and connect them to external data sources like that BigQuery table that I was showing, right? So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a new report. Okay. In fact, let's make it even beautiful, right? So it ends up being beautiful. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with this one. And I'm going to make a copy of this report for me. Right? I'm just doing this so I get the colors and it looks better, right, than a blank page. And then I'm going to click on Edit over here. Right? I'm going to dismiss this warning. I'm going to delete this because I don't need it. I'm going to delete this because I don't need it. So the next step is to add my own data source, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to, I think is resource, this menu over here. And I'm going to click on Manage Added Data Sources. And I'm going to remove this. This is the data source that comes by default with that report that I copied, that I use as a template. I'm going to remove it. And I'm going to add my own data source. And here I'm going to select BigQuery because the open data sets that Reinaldo published and made available and free for everybody to use are on BigQuery. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to authorize Data Studio to use my BigQuery, of this account that I have here, right? And I'm going to enter the project ID manually. And again, I'm going to copy the project ID from this green text from this example query that is located in XisList.org/evidence. I'm going to do that. And I'm going to hit enter, right? I found the data set. Now I have the data set. And I'm going to focus on this table specifically that says PayPal Mafia, rank, spy assets, and locations worldwide. This is the one that has the addresses already decoded, which cost me, when I did it, hundreds of thousands of dollars to do it. Is this one, right? And then I click Add. I accept that warning. Now, that data set is connected to this report. And imagine, this is super easy to use, right? Now, the next thing that is useful to do is to set that as a default. So in report settings, so going to File, Report Settings, there is an option that says, what is the default data source? I want to make that be the default data source. So everything I do is automatically associated with this data source, right? So let's see what we can do here, right? Okay. So, for example, right, I want to add. Let's start with something kind of simple. Okay. Let's start by adding a table. So I'm going to add a table. Okay. With the addresses. Mm, really? Let's see. Hmm. 1 second. It's giving me a permission. It's giving me a permission problem, but it's odd because I can see the fields, right? So if it was able to fetch the field names, it means that it has access to the data set, right? Let's see. Let's do something. Let me try something here. 1 second. Okay, right? I'm going to try to create one report without copying the other because maybe there is a setting that it's conflicting there. I'm going to create just a blank report to see if I can make it work, right? I'm going to make this. Sorry. Uh, no. Mm. Okay, I know what it is. I know what it is. It's because it has access to the table, but it doesn't have access to run queries on that project. The same problem I had when I tried to run the query in the project, right? So what I really need to do, the solution, what you need to do, and this is why it's important for me to do this from scratch, because I'm facing the problems that you will face, right? And I'll tell you how to overcome them. So what you need to do really, right, is come to this table here in BigQuery. What is it? Locations for what? This one, right? And you can copy the ID, right? Now you go to your own Google project, right? And I guess what I would do, mm, let's see. Mm-mm. Yes, what I'm trying to do is to copy the table over. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, I think this is probably what I need to do. Just 1 second. I'm just trying to figure this out here on the fly. Okay. Yeah, maybe this will work. Let me see. I don't know if this will work, but so what I'm going to do, right? I'm going to use this feature that it's called data transfer, right? And but what I'm going to say is set up a transfer that copies that data set, and then I'm going to delete it after I do this exercise. But I'm going to copy the data set from where I publish it to my own project, and then I'm going to be able to use it in Data Studio or Looker, right? I mean, that's the plan. Let's see if it works. So this data set is called, yeah, so this is the project where the data is, right? Source data set. Uh, let's see. Let's see if it works. I don't know. So the data set will be this one. No, it doesn't exist in my account, right? Okay, let me think about this. Okay, I think there is another way to do this. You can come. This is just another way to copy the data, right? So this data to my data set, right? So what I'm going to do, remember that query we wrote, right? We wrote this query that says select address, blah blah blah. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select. Yes, this probably will work. Okay. So this is the game plan. What I'm going to do, I'm going to create a data set in my own project. Okay, that I can name it whatever I want. And I'm going to run a query that basically gives me all the addresses in the US. Right? I'm going to restrict this to the US because I'm creating this demo for the IRS and I guess the crime divisions of the crime division of the FBI and I don't know, probably the anti-corruption department, right? So I'm going to focus on the US, but this is applicable to every country, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a query that filters the table for this interesting table that has the addresses. It filters it by location to target the area, the country that I want to focus on, and I'm going to save those results as a new table in my own project, and then I'm going to use Data Studio to analyze it. Okay, that's the plan. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start by copying this query, right, which is probably here. Okay. So in this project, I'm in my own project here, and I can see that because it says call mobile 2024. It doesn't say the other project is Mos Kalanick, Mos Kalanick Field Omidyargio, right? So I'm in my own project on this one. Okay, so I'm going to create a new query, and I'm going to do this. I think first, before I do that, right, I need to create a data set. Okay, so here, I'm going to say create a data set, okay? So I'm going to say this is the data set. I'm going to call it demo D91-6, okay? This is an arbitrary name you can set. I think it has to be lowercase. I can't recall. Oh, no, it doesn't have to be lowercase. Yes, only letters, numbers, or underscore, okay? So it's the dash where it's breaking. Right? So I'm going to say demo D91_6, okay? And I'm going to set this to be in the US. I mean, the location of the data set. Okay. Okay, so I created the data set, right? So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new query, and I'm going to use the query that I created before, right? Where the condition is basically that the address is not null and that the address contains USA, right? If you want to make it more accurate, I would put a space before the USA, right? To make sure that if the street name has USA somewhere, it could be a street in a different country that has the letters USA somewhere in the name, right? It would also match. So if you want to reduce that probability, the probability of that happening, you add a space before the USA, right? To make sure it's something that starts with USA. I'm going to run the query to see if it works. It does work, right? But here I'm limiting it to 10 results, right? So what I need to do is to remove that restriction, right? And I'm going to do all. Right? And you can see there are 2.5 million properties in this table. This means there are 2.5 million, yes, 2.5 million properties in the US that I already decoded the address and mapped it to a score in the geo-index. Imagine that, right? So this is 2.5 million of businesses and households, right? This is huge, right? A huge number. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to click on Save Results, and I'm going to save it as a big query table. And in dataset, right, I think I already created a dataset, but I'm going to create another one, right, to make this easy. I'm going to say this is going to be, it's a demo D91-6, and I want to put the date of today, right? 2025-12-07. I'm going to create the dataset. And I'm going to name the table, right? So I'm going to name it USA properties marked in the geo index. Okay. See, so it exported so yeah, now I have my own data set in my own Google Cloud project that has this table with the results. And it has the address and the score, which are the two important things. But now, in reality, I want to give you all the fields. So to give you all the fields, what you have to do to change the query that I had and remove the select part of the query and put asterisks. That will give you everything, right? So I mean, all the other fields, because there I have some interesting fields in there that could also be helpful for you to, like, it has the latitude, the longitude, it has the qubits, it has a lot of things. And I'm going to save this again as a BigQuery table in this data set. And I'm going to say USA properties marked in geo index all fields. Okay. Okay. So now I have my table in my own data set with all the fields, right? I even put fields in here, right, that give you as a binary signal whether the property is in or around Russia or in or around China or in or around Cuba or in or around Venezuela. Of course, in this case, all of these are going to be 0 because I'm selecting properties only in the US, right? But if you remove that condition, you could filter by, is this thing in China or near China? And this is the reason why the Communist Party of China dispatched the process server on April 16 to harass me, right? Because I was doing this. So, in this communist world, if you speak your mind, they harass you, right? That's the way it works. And they take your child with the courts and all that. So, okay. So now I have the table, right? So now we can go back to which is our end goal, right? To go to Data Studio to be able to build dashboards with this data and analyze it in any way we want, right? We slice it and dice it. So let's go back to, I think it's this one. No, this one. Yes, this one, right? So here, again, I'm going to go to resources, manage added data sources, but I'm going to delete this one because I'm not going to be able to run the queries in that project. That's the problem, right? That we saw before. So I'm going to delete it. And I'm going to add a new data source. Again, I'm going to repeat the process I did before, BigQuery. I'm going to click on BigQuery. But here, I'm going to click on, in this case, it says this because this is my Google Cloud project, right? But when you do this on your own Google Cloud account, here it will say something else. But this is the name of my project, right? So you see, here's the data set that I just created. So, and if you click on that, these are the two tables that I just copied over. You see? Now I have the tables and I can run queries on this project. Yes, so the one with all the fields is the one I want, this one. Okay, and I'm gonna again change the default for it to be this new table. Right. And now I'm gonna try again, and I'm gonna add a table. You see, now I see the data because underneath, under the hood, is running queries in my own Google Cloud project, which I have permissions to run queries on, right? Now, when you select the widget in Data Studio, let me see if I can increase the zoom here. So this is right now, see? Okay. And I'm going to, so when you click on a widget, you can edit the widget here on this side, right? So a style, for example, I'm going to change it to make the background white, so you can see better. Because I think that color is kind of hard to see. What is it? Background white. Oh, the row. Okay. And now, if you click on setup, you can actually change the metrics in the column or even the names in some of the columns. Like, so for example, it automatically picked because it does analysis and it thinks that this is an interesting thing to see, but you can remove it. I'm talking about the qubits, right? And you can see the same 2 million properties, 2.5, so 2,500,000, 514,582 properties are in this table that have addresses that are in the US. So you can see that it matches what BigQuery saw, right? So it means that it's working. No data is being lost. And I can add a dimension, right? So for example, I can add as a dimension the address. So it's gonna give me the addresses, and of course, each address is going to have, it should have one record count. Well, so this means that this address, for some reason, is repeated 3 times. Maybe it got 3 times different pipelines, But beyond that, this is just a count of occurrences. I mean, the record count. So this is not very interesting, but you can add as a metric the score, right? And then we will be able to sort by score. So the score is this one: Moss, Kalanick, Omidyar, Thiel, Evil score, right? That is the score. Oh, let me see. Hmm. Yeah, pick this one. The other score has some problem. I have to debug what it is. But if you pick this one that says Travis Kalanick Evil score copyrighted, this is in a different scale, but it accomplishes the same purpose. But it makes me curious. What could be wrong with that score? I see what it is. That by default it has sum. So if one of those repeated addresses has a null value, it cannot compute the sum, right? So I think if I change it by max, let me try. Most Kalanick over there, evil score, this one, right? If I change it by instead of sum, by max. No. Hmm. Another way to do this is by filtering it, right? So I can add a filter. Yeah, maybe I should do that. Let me see. Where's the filters? Filters. Here. So I can add a filter saying um, that it has a score that is valid, right? So I'm going to say that include only the ones where this field is not null, or exclude the ones that are null. To see if that saves it. I don't know. No, it doesn't work. Okay, so let's do something else. Let's go back to manage data sources. I'm going to add a second data source on the same. Actually, let me see something here. Yeah, I mean, to not make this overly complicated, let's work with that code, with the other code that is available, right? Which is where were we? Cancel. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove the score that is giving me problems, which is this one. I'm going to work only with the other one. Okay. The reason why I wanted to use the other one is because the other one has the crypto payments. This one is about surveillance. This is core, and that's why the scale is different. This one is not crypto. This one is surveillance. But you know, it's also useful, right? Okay, so for example, right, I can do that, and I can, for example, add as another dimension. I can't recall if this is here. Right. I can add, for example, let's do something interesting. Let's add a filter, right? A control. So let's do a drop-down list, right? And we're going to add as a property to filter by the address, right? Let me delete this because this doesn't help me, right? So what I can do here, I can filter by things in the address, right? So if I type, for example, 77494, this would be basically filtering by the zip code of 77494, right? And you can see the top address in here is this 700 Cobia Drive, which is discussed in one of the mobile demos. I think it was M1 or M2. It's in the YouTube channel, and I went physically to that address and saw what it was there. Right? I think it was an apartment complex where they have somebody who is handling the finances. Right? Uh, but you see, you can use this of what I'm doing. Right? You can build a UI that lets you filter and see list of properties by complex criteria, right? Even without writing even a single SQL query. So this is very powerful because it empowers agencies to do investigation on the network using their own data without even to have one engineer, right? All you have to do is follow this process and you can build dashboards with this. And you can put charts, you can put filters. Like for example, if you wanted to build something with a chart, right? Like let's do a map. So you can see the power of this, right? You can add a chart and you can add a map. Let's do a bubble map, right? And in dimension, what you have to select, you have to do something here first. You have to go to resource, manage added data sources, edit this data source that you just added. And on the address field, by default, it's going to say text, but you can change that to be a geo field. And you can say that it's an address, this one, right? So you select address, and that makes it interpret that field as an address, parse it as an address, and understand it as an address. And then you can use it in a map. But you have to do this little setup first. Otherwise, it won't let you. So after you do that, you click on this, and you can add the address as a field. It's going to take a few seconds because it's a lot of data, right? It's 2.5 million properties, right? And it's trying to build a bubble map of this, or a heat map. You see, so there's some addresses that although I put USA, they fell overseas because they probably have the word space USA somewhere in the name for some reason, right? But you see the concentration, and this is what I wanted to show you, right? This was my goal with this demo, because before we were talking about the economics of a zip code, right? And you can here see it visually, and I show you that they're able to recapture or recoup from financially, right? I mean, I'm talking about the Communist Party of China. They are able, with a minimal investment, to recoup $1.2 billion, I think it was, from the zip code 77494 every year. And it goes up because every year they increase the property values, which means they increase what they can recoup via the property taxes. And each year they increase the salaries of the agents, which means that they can increase what they recoup via the credit card spending, the 3% fee, right? But if you expand this map, you can see where the zip codes are, right? And you can change this to be a heat map, because I think I selected bubbles, but you can select heat map, right? You can see, and this would give you the sum of the numbers, right? Of the scores. So you can see that, you know, Austin, the thing is, this would be, where would this be? Dallas, right? So there is a zip code here in Dallas that is even higher value than Katy. That's what that means. But you can see, right? So what I'm saying is, if you think of these, you know, spots in this heat map, and you know, like not all of them will produce $1.2 billion, right, per year, but some of them will produce 1.2 billion, some of them will produce 800 million, but you see how many they are, right? And if I show you how many are in the planet, they're in every single country, right? So if you add them up, this means that the Communist Party of China is perceiving in this way hundreds of billions of dollars, if not maybe $1 trillion per year. I don't know, right? I haven't done the calculation and the exercise across all the planet, but this is something that authorities, I'm talking about taxation authorities of every single country, they need to do this exercise in depth with, you know, scientific, because I'm doing just the headroom analysis, but you can go in through every single, and there might be other categories that I'm not even thinking about, right? Because I'm not an accountant. You need kind of a team of forensic accountants to analyze these line items in the headroom analysis and see if there are other line items that I didn't think of. There probably are, right? And you need to do this over every single country. And I imagine that authorities of every single country may want to collaborate with each other to really understand what is the recoup capability of the Communist Party of China using this hub economy that they have across the planet. And this, I'm betting, will probably correlate with the size of the economy of China, right? That's a country, right? Or the China and the others, right, combined. There must be a strong correlation between how this metric, aggregated metric around the world, moves over time, and how their quote unquote GDP, because it's not really GDP. It's not an internal product what they're producing. They are basically extracting it from the other countries, right? In this way with these hubs. But you know, they will probably call it GDP, right? But the combined GDP, I'm guessing, moves in a correlated way with the extraction metrics that I'm describing here in this headroom analysis, if you compute them with rigor across the planet. So, you know, but again, like, this is just a theory, but it needs to be addressed and investigated by authorities, right? Like, that's what I would, you know, suggest, right? And when I say these things, I want to say I'm saying these things humbly, like with you know, I'm just a little guy trying to share what I've understood and the technologies that I've developed with the rest of the people that may be interested in consuming this information, right? I'm by no means telling anybody what to do, right? Like, I'm just a little guy trying to share, right? My own TTPs that I've developed by investigating this network. So anyhow, I think this is a good point to stop this demo, because I don't want to get more technical on this, but you know, the basic things I showed you, right? How to get the data, how to copy the data to your own project in BigQuery, how to connect it to Data Studio or Looker, it's been renamed, and how to create widgets, maps, filters, tables that you can filter by, right? That you can. There's another one interesting. Here, one thing that I didn't show you. This table obviously is not sorted, right? And I saw that because when you click on this, you see that there are properties, right, that have scores in the millions, and the top here is 30 or 10, right? So this, the problem is here that I did not sort this one. So I'm going to fix this to show you how to sort it, right? Because that's an important thing to do. So you can focus on you can do headroom analysis basically by sorting, right? And that's what I do with the pipelines when I pick the targets to report to the IRS. What I'm doing is maximizing, doing headroom analysis to maximize the recoupable amount of money, right? So when you click on the table, there is a field here in setup that says sort. And right now, so right now, I'm going to remove this filter. And the sort, right? So it's sorting by record count, by how many times it's repeated. That's meaningless, right? What you need to do is sort by the score, right? This is score we're seeing here in descending order, right? So you see this property. This is the eBay property we talked about before. I even put eBay in the street name. These 40 Patriots, and Patriots is an important name marker in this network, right? So this is in Mount Pleasant, right? This is the other one. I think I already showed you this one. But if not, let's go there. Yeah, it's a museum. Imagine that. Is it the same? Let me reduce the size of this so I can see better. Yeah, 40 Patriots Point Road. Yes. So, they must have somebody important in that museum, right? Or something important in that museum that they're tracking. And you see that it's protected by the buffer zones. You can see the entire thing here, right? Like, this thing is uninterceptable, right? Any way you look at it. Question, it has the golf course next to it, right? Yeah, this has the works. The question is, who planned the construction of this museum, right? I think that I would ask myself that question. Who picked this spot and who bought that land? It's important to understand. But anyhow, you can see how you can sort it. Oh, and the other thing I didn't show you is the filtering by value. So there is a filtering here at control, right? There is a filter that is, I think it's a slider. That's what it's called. And it basically allows you to sort by a range, right? So you can do, in this example, it picked to do it by latitude, for example, right? So you can, if you put two of these, one for latitude and one for longitude, you can filter by a kind of a geographical region, right? Because here it has the lower, you can set the lower bound and the higher bound. So if you do this for latitude and longitude, you can basically create a bounding box, right? Or you can, instead of doing that, go to setup and change the metric, the control field, and set it to be the score, for example, right? And then you can do things like, well, I only want to see properties that have the score being between 3.4 million, just making up an example, right? And I don't know, 7 million, right? So it would be the eBay property, and you can expand the range, right? And see the others, right? So the other one is the question property that we touched about before, or you can move the lower range and then you get more properties, right? So you see, with this technology that I'm talking about, Data Studio and Looker, you can, because it's connected to BigQuery and the data is already there, and I already spent the money to resolve the addresses, so everybody has them. You can build these dashboards yourself, and you can do analysis yourself in any way you wish. So it's a very, very powerful tool for the IRS, right? And of course, I'm going to take the transcript of this demo and I'm going to include it in the book so the people from the whistleblower office have not only the demos and the data, but also the TTP and the techniques on how to use it at a scale, right? So there is no excuse for not investigating this network from the IRS point of view. That is my end goal. So with that thought, I'm going to close this demo. I'm going to thank you again for your time, and I'll see you on the next demo. Okay. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful Sunday.